Britain is too fat.
Americans are not winning their battle against obesity.
Low carb versus low fat.
Sugar
Which diet is better for the body?
Low carb is the way to go. Others say actually it's just the opposite.
Generation fat.
Are we allowed to use the word fat?
Listening to mainstream media, there's always something new that's trying to kill you.
A health alert. The fast food you're eating could cut your life short.
And they're not exactly wrong. 4 out of the top 6 global causes of death are directly related to what you eat. But this isn't anything new. We've known obesity has been increasing for decades. This is what the average waist size was in the 1950s, and this is what it is today. For context, my BMI is 24. Today, 38% of people are either overweight or obese, and this is predicted to rise to 50% by 2035, which might not seem like a big deal. Like, why does this even matter? Well, obesity affects pretty much every aspect of your health, from shortening life to contributing to diabetes and cardiovascular disease, to even like contributing to your mental health, even affecting your social interactions. And it's pretty much the biggest determining factor as to whether you're healthy or not. But we've literally all heard this before, like we all know obesity is bad for your health. But why are obesity rates going up then? Well, think about your favorite chocolate bar. Do you think eating it's going to kill you? Well, a single chocolate bar certainly isn't going to have any major effect on your health. But we're not really talking about a single chocolate bar here. No one becomes obese because they decided to eat a chocolate bar. People become obese because they just stop with a single chocolate bar. And that's the problem we're facing. It's not really just a single decision, but it's multiple decisions every single day over multiple years. And because we're the ones making those decisions, it's kind of seen as our problem. If we become obese, it's our fault because we put the food in our bodies. And you know, logically that it kind of makes sense, but that's not really the whole story here. You see, the goal of most food companies isn't to make you as healthy as possible. All these companies have shareholders, and their priority is to make those shareholders as much money as possible. And the way they do that is by selling you as much food as possible. So the more food you eat, the more food you buy, and the more money that these companies make. And the way they do this is through something called ultra-processed food. Ultra-processed food in Western countries like the US and the UK makes up over 50% of diets. But what does ultra-processed food actually look like? If I asked you what you think ultra-processed food might be, maybe you might say something like McDonald's, or maybe a chocolate bar or donuts. I think we all definitely have a clear idea of certain foods which are definitely ultra processed. But working out whether something is ultra processed or not is actually really difficult, and it's something that even food and nutrition experts struggle to do. But really, how difficult can it be? So these are some items that I've bought from a supermarket. Which of them do you think are ultra processed, and which of them do you think are not ultra processed? Got some Eat Real crisps, multi-seeded farmhouse bread, some corn, custard creams, cherry Alpro yogurt, vegan basil pesto, raw fruit and nut bars, and some rice cakes. So which of these do you think are ultra processed? Well, it was actually a trick question. Everything on this table is actually ultra processed. But why does this even matter? Like, is ultra processed food actually that bad for you? What about, say, these raw fruit and nut bars? Surely they're not too bad for you, right? We'll get to that, but first we need to understand what makes something ultra processed. The easiest way to explain ultra processed food is it contains ingredients that you wouldn't necessarily find in your kitchen at home. So this could be E-numbers, it could be emulsifiers, or stuff like corn syrup. Basically, there are thousands of industrial ingredients that you wouldn't have in your kitchen at home. And this is where it all gets confusing with packaging. We all have these foods that are labeled low in fat, high in fiber, or reduced sugar, and they're kind of often aimed at making foods appear the healthier choice, but realistically a lot of them are still ultra processed foods. In the UK we have this traffic light food system where foods that are mostly green are supposed to be healthy and those that are red are mostly unhealthy. And from a macronutrient perspective that might be true, but this kind of isn't really addressing the problem. Like, we've had this traffic light system for a while now and obesity rates are still going up. And this is kind of the main problem with ultra processed foods, is that they're designed to be overeaten. So it doesn't really matter if the ready meal that you've just eaten has 2 green labels and 2 orange labels if you then go and raid the food cupboard after because you're still hungry. And that's because ultra processed food has been specifically designed this way. But what is it about ultra processed food that makes you just want to keep eating it? In short, it comes back to food companies wanting to make as much money as possible. And to do this, they make their food as addictive as possible. And in doing so, they refine products multiple times, enhancing the taste, enhancing the texture, basically making the food as addictive as possible. And this wouldn't be a problem if the food that they were making addictive was fruit and vegetables. But it's not. It's food that is often high in calories, low in fiber, and kind of lacks the nutrients that we need to be healthy. And in fact, this food is so addictive that people in one clinical study ended up consuming an additional 500 calories per day on an ultra-processed diet compared to people who were on a non-ultra-processed diet, which is actually ridiculous. If you consume that diet for an entire year, you'll be 23 kilograms heavier than a person on the non-ultra-processed food diet. Perhaps it's no surprise that ultra-processed foods have been linked to several health issues, including cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and early death. And that's a very oversimplified version of how ultra-processed food works. Basically, it's more addictive, so you end up consuming more calories, which contributes to obesity and the associated health issues. And for most media outlets, that's kind of where the story ends. But let's say if you wanted to reduce your consumption of ultra-processed foods, well, by doing so, you'd also be increasing your consumption of whole and minimally processed foods, which just so happen to be pretty good for you. Obviously, they're full of vitamins, minerals, and fiber, which contribute to your overall physical well-being. But research also shows a link between diet and mental health, where consuming a diet that is rich in whole foods can actually be positive for your mood and actually can reduce the risk of some mental health issues. Also, consuming food which contains complex carbohydrates can be useful in providing you energy throughout the day, rather than giving you these massive spikes and massive lows. You kind of just get this consistent energy level. And for me personally, that's certainly been the biggest benefit. I've personally started reducing my ultra-processed food consumption, and I've definitely found that I have more energy throughout the day. You see, before I used to eat things like granola bars, and I'd have like these massive spikes in energy, and then like a couple hours later, wouldn't really be feeling great. I'd feel quite low in mood. Whereas now I just have consistent energy throughout the day. And part of the problem with fluctuating energy levels throughout the day is you're gonna have these times of the day where you have kind of low energy and a low mood. And in those times, you're kind of at risk from engaging in unhealthy eating behaviors and can end up consuming more calories. So you've obviously made it this far, you're obviously interested in ultra-processed foods, but just because you watched a video doesn't mean you should believe everything that I've just told you. You should go away, do your own research. This is really important, and you should really form your own opinion of what you think is right for you. If you want to learn more about ultra-processed food, I recommend reading the book Ultra-Processed People by Chris Van Tulleken. He's kind of the main pioneer in the ultra-processed food space, and it's definitely a great place to get an understanding of the whole arguments behind ultra-processed food. I've also launched a website where I've written some articles about ultra-processed food, so if you want to check that out, the link is in the description below.